The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Also with you.
Gracious and loving God, Holy Spirit, you are ever active in our lives and in our midst, and you speak to us in every age and in every time, through the circumstances of our lives and through the voices of wisdom scattered throughout the world. We give you thanks that you have spoken to us in this document and through the writer of this document, through Pope Francis. We pray that you will continue to speak to us and that you speak to us now as we dive deep into these words. Light of the world, dawn anew in our hearts and in our minds as we enter the season of Advent, for the sake of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, well, we're missing Margie this morning.
I think she's with her family.
Oh, that's right, that's right, that's right. We're at paragraph 37, I believe. An absence of human dignity on the borders. Well, that heading says it right there. Certain populist political regimes, as well as certain liberal economic approaches, maintain that an influx of migrants is to be prevented at all costs. Arguments are also made for the propriety of limiting aid to poor countries so that they can hit rock bottom and find themselves forced to take austerity measures. One fails to realize that behind such statements, abstract and hard to support, great numbers of lives are at stake. Many migrants have fled from war, persecution, and natural catastrophes. Others, rightly, are seeking opportunities for themselves and their families. They dream of a better future, and they want to create the conditions for achieving it. Anybody want to speak to that?
I was just so excited to hear the new cabinet appointees speaking yesterday and addressing this very thing, that we're going to try to restore America's identity as one that welcomes people.
Yeah. I'm thinking of, in this morning's LA Times, there's an article about another crisis in Ethiopia. And refugees now flooding into Sudan from Ethiopia, but Sudan doesn't have much to offer them and is thinking of closing their borders. And of course, we still got a crisis on our own southern border. And voices saying that that has to remain closed. One fails to realize that behind such statements, abstract and hard to support, great numbers of lives are at stake. Who would like to read the next paragraph?
I
I'll
will.
read it.
Oh, good.
Sadly, some are attracted by Western culture, sometimes with unrealistic expectations that expose them to grave disappointments. Unscrupulous traffickers, frequently linked to drug cartels or arms cartels, exploit the weakness of migrants, who too often experience violence, trafficking, psychological and physical abuse, and untold sufferings on their journey. Those who immigrate experience separation from their place of origin, and often a cultural and religious uprooting as well. Fragmentation is also led by the communities they leave behind, which lose their most vigorous and enterprising elements, and by families, especially one or both of the parents migrates, leaving the children in the country of origin. For this reason, there is also a need to reaffirm the right not to immigrate, that is, to remain in one's homeland. Going on?
Now let's stop with that one for a moment.
I have a question. What do you think Pope Francis is, I guess, trying to say when he says they have a need to reaffirm the right not to emigrate? I don't quite follow that reasoning.
I think he's kind of hinting at what would be preferable is if conditions could be made better in the country of origin for these people.
Mm-hmm.
If their homeland could be made more hospitable, and if greater opportunities could be made available for them, if the conditions that are driving them to migrate could be mitigated so that they don't feel a need to migrate. That, I think, is part of what's encompassed in his statement, a right not to emigrate.
Okay.
It's an interesting way to say it. And it would need more cooperation worldwide for that to happen for people. There's a lot implied in that. But I kind of think that's what he's hinting at here.
Okay. So it presupposes that the country of origin has the ability to retain these people because of their improved living circumstance.
Maybe not all by itself, but yes.
Okay.
Yes, if conditions were corrected at home, this could go a long way toward correcting the destabilizing forces of migration.
So in a way, for me anyway, it kind of glosses over some of the political realities of the country of origin. I may not have all my facts correct, but I'm thinking about places like Guatemala, where there's so many gangs, and or even in Mexico, where there's so many gangs, that politically it is so difficult to eradicate that kind of violence in order to make a country of origin safe to live in.
Right. Let's see if he addresses that. And because you're right, Phil, those are the problems that need to be solved, or those are among the problems that need to be solved. And the problems aren't the same everywhere, but often that is part of the problem, the violence that's at home.
Mm-hmm.
But where does that violence originate? When you think of the drug cartel problems, for instance, in Guatemala, the violent drug gangs, where did that problem originate? Well, it's something that didn't originate in their country. It originated in our country. We created the market for it. They had the product, but they didn't create the product on a large scale until we created the market for it.
Okay, I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
But you also, I'm reminded, I don't know if you recently in the last 2 weeks have saw the Mexican general that was captured in the United States and was going to be charged for drug offenses. And he apparently had been, this is the guy that heads up I believe headed up the military in Mexico, and or at least was the second in command. And he was tipping people off to the drug cartels as to shipments and when the heat would be on. And he made millions of dollars doing that. So, I thought, yay for us. But a couple days later, we dropped the charges, supposedly so he can be tried in Mexico. Well,
Right.
come to find out, what happened is that the president of Mexico intervened and threatened to quit cooperating with security in the United States if we didn't turn the general to Mexico. And of course, the feeling being that, both of them have their fingers in the pot. So anyway, just disappointing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Follow the money. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. Go on.
In some host countries, migration causes fear and alarm, often fomented and exploited for political purposes. This can lead to xenophobic mentality as people close in on themselves, and it needs to be addressed decisively. Migrants are not seen as entitled like others to participate in the life of society, and it is forgotten that they possess the same intrinsic dignity as any person. Hence, they ought to be agents in their own redemption. No one will ever openly deny that they are human beings, yet in practice, by our decisions and the way we treat them, we can show that we consider them less worthy, less important, less human. For Christians, this way of thinking and acting is unacceptable, since it sets political preferences above the deep convictions of our faith. The inalienable dignity of each human person, regardless of origin, race, or religion, and the supreme law of fraternal love.
Right. I'm reminded of the Levitical laws that say that you shall treat the alien in your homeland as a citizen, and that you shall not deny the alien in your land any rights. But we don't seem to pay attention to that. Of course, that's, separation of church and state there.
Luckily, we're not under the law.
Sometimes it might be better if we were.
Yeah.
Under the law of love, we would be doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But I think, I guess one of the thoughts I have about is that is about how much can you give, and because we could destroy the system if we were too open, and yet I think I focus kind of on the xenophobic mentality. Is that I think it's imperative for the government to create some sort of filters and limitations, but at the same time they have to do it, recognizing that these people are human beings, rather than just treating them as if they're second-class citizens.
Yeah.
But I struggle with it.
Well, yeah, there are no simple solutions, but there are certainly better ones than the ones we're using now.
Yes, there are. Yes, there are.
Well, it also, at least in my experience of living in a foreign country, and I started thinking about this a lot, because you would consider me living in Italy an expatriate. But what's the difference between an expatriate and an immigrant? the ways in which we treat those two categories of people simply based on what is their reason for being there. So if they're going to be a drain on the system in some regard, they're going to be taking more than they're giving, or at least for expatriates, we are there for a short amount of time. So we're seen as less of a threat than the immigrants themselves. So it's been very interesting then returning back here and then hearing conversations of immigrants, and you realize this has some of this has to do in the way that we talk about the ways in which we talk about how we categorize them or why they're here to begin with, which is sad. It's really sad that instead of having why are they here, we have the conversations of what do we do with them now.
Yeah.
That's why I like one of the things that has been really troubling is the rule that's been imposed about that if migrants go on welfare, that they can be booted out of the country. And what that's led to is migrants not accessing welfare when they need it. And some of that is healthcare, which when they don't access healthcare, it makes it bad for everybody.
Well, and that raises the whole question of what do we do about healthcare in our country? I know when Mary and I got sick in Austria, and we went to the doctor, and I was thinking, oh my God, this is going to crash our economy for our trip. This is going to take all the money we have left, and we're going to have to write home and call home and have our folks send us some money and yada, yada, yada. And I asked the doctor, how much do we owe you? And he said, you don't owe me anything. National Healthcare Service will pay for this. Mm. I said, but we're not citizens. And he said, no, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's a whole other discussion, but that was our experience. Same thing happened in France when Mary had to go to the doctor for a small problem. No charge. Anyway.
I just
can't
imagine living in Belmont Shore, just steps away from 2nd Street. There's a lot of foot traffic there. And over the years, I've seen primarily Caucasians. This is going back into the 70s when I moved there in 1970. And now we have people of all races and color, and it's a beautiful thing. But being a port city, we know that there's a lot of people coming to Long Beach, and often when I see other races and cultures coming in, you can sort of pick them out who don't live in Belmont Shore. You wonder, I wonder if they're brand new, and I sort of put myself in their eyes when they're looking around, and I just wonder if they're new here. And in the paragraph before it talks about psychological and physical abuse, and it's sad to think that a lot of these people who are coming here to fulfill their dreams or to find a better way of life receive those kinds of looks, which to me is a psychological abuse or even physical abuse by gangs. And all they want is something better than what they had.
Yeah, how sad is it when make all that effort only to find they've come into a different kind of nightmare altogether.
Yeah.
I think of those parents separated from their kids at the border and the kids kept in cages, and oh God, that is just the most horrific thing.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I think that's one of the most awful things our country has ever done.
Ever.
Horrible.
Uh,
But it
When they're
reminds me,
so
you know,
separated.
when I do see people, you know, they're the ones that we need to recognize with our eyes when we pass each other, and with a nod or a smile, because that's all that's all a lot of people need.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Okay, you want to continue reading, Bob?
Sure. Migrations, more than ever before, will play a pivotal role in the future of our world. At present, however, migration is affected by the loss of that sense of responsibility for our brothers and sisters on which every civil society is based. Europe, for example, seriously risks taking this path. Nonetheless, aided by its great cultural and religious heritage, it has the means to defend the centrality of the human person and to find the right balance between its twofold moral responsibility, to protect the rights of its citizens and to assure assistance and acceptance to migrants. Well, that's certainly my issue. Should I go on? I realize that some people are hesitant and fearful with regard to migrants. I consider this part of our natural instinct of self-defense. Yet it is also true that an individual and a people are only fruitful and productive if they are able to develop a creative openness to others. I ask everyone to move beyond those primal reactions because there is a problem when doubts and fears condition our way of thinking and acting to the point of making us intolerant, closed, and perhaps even without realizing it, racist. In this way, fear deprives us of the desire and the ability to encounter the other. Sounds like what you were saying, Sandy.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And I didn't read that. I wasn't cheating.
I think it's interesting that there are certain classes of people who seem to be exempt from all the migratory restrictions. For instance, if you are extremely talented in a particular area, if you're a really talented musician or actor, actress, performer, you get a kind of carte blanche to go anywhere in the world you need to go to perform. Yeah, I mean, gates open for you. If you are an extremely capable scientist with a particular expertise, especially in medicine or in certain areas of physics, same thing. Certain people like, well, what was her name? The young girl who was speaking about environmental issues.
Aaron Brockovich?
Greta Thunberg.
Greta,
Yeah. I mean, she became a kind of celebrity, but you notice that she was able to go anywhere in the world fairly quickly and fairly easily without going through all kinds of, jumping through a whole lot of hoops that normal people would have to jump through. It's interesting that again, a certain level of celebrity, I guess would be the word, and a certain level of ability carries you beyond the borders. Why is the world not open to others in the same way? And you know that the same thing applies with a certain level of money, a certain level of wealth. And it applies for a certain kind of commerce. Businesses, there are other ladders that they have to climb and other gates that they have to open. But that gets open more easily because of the money involved, usually.
Or their name, Dennis Rodman, the Kardashians, Kanye West. They've gotten to go right to the White House and further.
Well, Dennis Rodman's a good example, Sandy, because I mean, remember when he went to North Korea?
Yep.
To meet with Kim Jong-un? It was like, how the heck did he get to do that?
Yep.
Nobody gets into North Korea.
So another question is, how did he ever get to come back?
Well, yeah. Yeah. So all things are not equal.
But some of those are based upon the value to our society. And and that's the key to it. And I do have to say that those people do have to satisfy the same requirements that you and I do, but there are special categories for them. And so, like, for the elite entertainer to come here, he has to get a visa just like everybody else. And but he's in a specific category, and it kind of sails through. I know of immigration guys that's what they specialize in, and you
Right.
can imagine, because it's well paying, and so that's what's going on.
Right. And there's a special department in the State Department to handle that kind of stuff.
Very likely, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I know that on a technical level, they've got to have the same paper we have to have. It's just they get it a lot more quickly and easily. Anyway, the illusion of communication.
Oddly enough, while closed and intolerant attitudes towards others are on the rise, distances are otherwise shrinking or disappearing to the point that the right to privacy secrets scarcely exists. Everything that has become a kind of spectacle to be examined and inspected, and people's lives are now under constant surveillance. Digital communication wants to bring everything out to the open. People's lives are combed over, laid bare, and bandied about, often anonymously. Respect for others disintegrates, and even as we dismiss, ignore, or keep others distant, we can shamelessly peer into every detail of their lives.
Mary and I watch a lot of British TV shows. We have BritBox, we have Acorn, and we especially like a lot of their detective shows.
Yeah.
And in every episode, there's some point where they look at the closed circuit TV cameras.
Yeah, isn't it?
Because apparently,
and it's called
sorry?
CCTV.
Yeah, and the CCTV cameras are everywhere apparently in Britain. They're on traffic everywhere, and they're like on storefronts, and it's like a major thing in solving crimes over there, because it's like one of the first things they do. It's like one of the first things the inspector always says is, well, check out the CCTV and see what we can see about this person's comings and goings. And
Well, what's scary is every now and again something will pop up on my phone, and it's like Google, and it tells me where I have been, like
yeah,
the past week or two, every place. I'm like, oh, who needs a calendar? Just go here, to see where you've been, what you've done. Oh, that's scary.
Well, and right now, I now have an iPhone 12. And one of the first things they asked me when I was setting up is, did I want to make myself available for contact tracing because of COVID-19? And I said, sure, yes, because if I have come in contact with somebody who has it, I want to know. But then it got me to wondering,
Yeah,
are you keeping track of this anyway?
yeah,
Because I know that the phones do track our movements.
yeah,
I know the GPS tracks our movements.
yeah.
And you know, at a certain point, you just kind of have to say, well, that's just part of life in the modern world. And since I'm not in the habit of going places I would be ashamed to have people find out about, that's,
You're okay. Well,
yeah,
and
this
same,
is-
yeah, same on the computer,
but-
you know, the history of where you've been.
But wait
Yeah.
until your urologist calls you up because you're going to the bathroom a lot.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's like, do you really need to make that many trips to Costco?
Yeah.
That's where I get my meds. Okay.
You know, but on the insidious side of that is this the tracking system that Red China is putting together, or the system that Red China is putting
Right.
together. And they're tracking, you know, how many dog licenses you have, and if you've been you know, involved and arrested in any demonstrations, and are you paying your taxes on time? Are you paying your debts on time? And all this is being massaged into a score about how good of a citizen you are.
Oh, and even if you're rude to people,
Yeah.
yeah, if you upset somebody, or if you're rude to somebody, or if somebody just doesn't like you, they can report it. You know, you can get a demerit for that,
Yeah.
and you get a citizenship score.
Do you get 2 demerits if they're a party member that you insult?
Yeah, it's a little scary.
It is. It is. I mean, that's way too much Big Brother.
Okay, 43.
Digital campaigns of hatred and destruction, for their part, are not, as some would have us believe, a positive form of mutual support, but simply an association of individuals united against a perceived common enemy. Digital media can also expose people to the risk of addiction, isolation, and a gradual loss of contact with concrete reality, blocking the development of authentic interpersonal relationships. They lack the physical gestures, facial expressions, moments of silence, body language, and even the smells, the trembling of hands, the blushes and perspiration that speak to us and are part of the human communication. Digital relationships which do not demand the slow and gradual cultivation of friendships, stable interaction, or the building of consensus that matures over time have the appearance of sociability. Yet they do not really build community. Instead, they tend to disguise and expand the very individualism that finds expression in xenophobia and in contempt for the vulnerable. Digital connectivity is not enough to build bridges. It is not capable of uniting humanity. Wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah, especially in this time of COVID.
Yeah. Well, I would say that Zoom and Skype and FaceTime mitigate that a little bit, because we can see each other and we can read each other's facial expressions and look at each other's body language, at least to some degree. So that helps. Yeah, I'm thinking of a counseling session I did with somebody not too long ago, where I was seeing some stuff in the body language that was really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kept wondering to myself if this person would have been more aware of their body language if we'd actually been sitting there together in person. Anyway.
I'm
so-
also seeing that this is talking about digital, it starts off talking about digital campaigns. And that kind of reminds me of the ability of the internet to let people collect with other people who feel the same way. And
Right.
so, and so instead of kind of being exposed to other attitudes, they're going to get reinforced, and it becomes more of a campaign for them.
Yeah, it makes me think of that. There's a whole lot of ultra right wing folks who've been leaving Facebook to go to I forget what that other platform is.
Parlor.
Arle,
Yeah, Parlor.
Yeah.
Or Parlay, because they felt like Facebook was censoring them too much. You know, taking too many of their posts and saying this is not factual, this is not factual. And Twitter's been doing the same, you know, calling them out on stuff they post that's not factual. So they've been sliding over to their alternate reality.
Yeah, you're right.
that's what it is.
Well, what can you do about that? It'd be nice if we had a law or laws that said everybody has to speak the truth.
Ah, yes.
There's that First Amendment, you know, the right of free speech.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for, huh?
Yeah. You shall not bear false witness. I love Luther's explanation of that commandment. It's not enough just to not lie. You should try to say the best thing you can. You should try to put your neighbor in the best possible light, the best possible understanding.
You know, it kind of reminds me of a situation you find in litigation, is that nobody wants to make the first offer, because we all know that whoever makes the first offer gets the raw end of the deal. So and so that's one of the reasons that they have mandatory settlement conferences. And I know people, I know people that will have made up their mind what they want to do, but they don't do it because there's a mandatory settlement conference coming up. So they sit and wait until they're forced to be in the same room, and then they talk to each other. And so to some extent, I'm thinking, you know, that's actually to some extent what our government does when we have places like our legislatures, is they bring these, you know, countervailing ideas, philosophies, goals together, force them together so that they have to talk to each other, which we don't have, because I'm building off of what you were talking about, is, you know, if we were somehow forced to have to do that. And maybe that's what elections do. You know, it's not so much that we're talking to each other, but it shows us where we are.
I think that's what elections used to do. I mean it. I mean, I really do think that's what they used to do. And I think that's what they were meant to do. This last couple, not so much. We talked past each other, or it clarified the divisions so that within our different sides, we talked within our groups. But there wasn't much conversation between the two sides.
Well, if the goal is to actually make progress, then yet the purpose of an election would be when both sides are putting forth in their very best light what they propose, what they believe in, what they would try to strive for, and then people can vote which is the way I want to go most. But no, it hasn't been happening that way.
Garrison Keillor had an interesting column this morning. Of course, he was writing half humorously, but he was saying that Americans don't really like democracy because if we did, we'd have more than two parties. He was saying, the Danes love democracy. They have 10 parties at least. And they even have some people in their parliament who don't like any of the parties, so they're there as independents.
Wow.
But what it means is that they have to form coalitions all the time.
Yeah.
It means they all have to talk to each other.
Mhm.
And I got to thinking about it, that's really kind of true. We end up with polarity because we only have two parties. So you
Well,
end up over here or over here. Whereas
Mhm.
if we had more variety of more than two really viable parties, we would have more viewpoints represented. We would have subtlety in the mix, and we'd have more discussion. It's a reminder too that most of the founders didn't really like parties, and it wasn't until the second election that they started to really form. And we can thank Thomas Jefferson for that, because he pulled a party together to try to defeat John Adams. History.
But I'm wondering actually if we're seeing some of that today in the Democratic Party, in the sense that the liberals and the moderates are going to have to work with each other. If anything happens.
And the progressives.
Progressives.
Yeah.
And progressives are considered.
Well, you see that happening on the Democratic Party, and then in the Republican Party, you see the moderates and the more radical right, the authoritarians. So maybe we are going to see things fragment more, and maybe we'll see new parties form, because party unity is under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a good thing.
On both sides.
On both sides, yeah. What time is it? Yeah, let's continue.
Even as individuals maintain their comfortable consumerist isolation, they can choose a form of constant and febrile bonding that encourages remarkable hostility, insults, abuse, defamation, and verbal violence destructive of others. And this with a lack of restraint that could not exist in physical contact without tearing us all apart. Social aggression has found unparalleled room for expansion through computers and mobile devices.
Febrile bonding. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it's really easy to type something in and then realize that, oh, I wish I hadn't said that was a little strong.
Oh, Bob, you are so even-tempered. I can't even imagine what that would be for you.
I call it drive-by posting. Yeah.
maybe you know that on my Outlook program is that, and it's a choice that you have, and I set mine to yes, is that it only sends when I hit the send button. Well, I mean, after I hit send button, it sits in my outbox, and there's a little reminder pops up before I close that, do you want to send your emails? And so if I don't say yes, it doesn't go. So and I can't tell you the number of times that second look has changed the content.
That's a good idea. I should probably develop that practice. Wow.
But it's
Although we do
definitely-
have the capability of deleting or editing our remarks
yeah.
if people know how to do that. I've done that a couple times.
Sometimes.
Some venues you can't. I mean, I always used to think that you could retract on Outlook, like Bob was saying, an email. If I send something and I thought, oh, I didn't put the attachment or whatever, and I go back in, and now you can't do that anymore. I think they took that ability out, as my experience. My new Outlook doesn't give me that option. That would be nice if you could, if you can actually retract something from a mailbox, if you send it in error, that would be nice. But
I just say oops and do another one.
yeah.
Ignore that.
Okay, a little more.
This has now given free rein to ideologies. Things that until a few years ago could not be said by anyone without risking the loss of universal respect can now be said with impunity and in the crudest of terms, and even by some political figures. Nor should we forget that there are huge economic interests operating in the digital world, capable of exercising forms of control as subtle as they are invasive, creating mechanisms for the manipulation of consciences and of the democratic process. The way many platforms work often ends up favoring and counter between persons who think alike, shielding them from debate. Those closed circuits facilitate the spread of fake news and false information, fomenting prejudice and hate.
Yeah, they actually create a false universe,
Yeah.
a false view of reality, which then makes it hard sometimes to distinguish what is real and what is fake.
And in fact, I made a correction the other day on Facebook. Somebody was grousing about Facebook removing emails or postings. And anyway, I pointed out that, I hear about it, but I haven't heard anybody who can say, yes, I posted this and it didn't happen. And although I wouldn't be surprised if it does. But I pointed out too that Facebook thrives on controversy, because the more traffic they can create, the more times those ads pop up, and the more times those ads pop up, the more
Yep.
money they make.
Yep.
So,
Mhm.
it's not in their interest to take down stuff. It's in their, and so anyway.
Yep.
But this is how it works. And we should also recognize that destructive forms of fanaticism are at times found among religious believers, including Christians. They too can be caught up in networks of verbal violence through the internet and various forms of digital communication. Even in Catholic media, limits can be overstepped. Defamation and slander can become commonplace, and all ethical standards and respect for the good name of others can be abandoned. How can this contribute to the fraternity that our common Father asks of us?
Boy, is that ever true. The worst arguments I've had with anybody on Facebook have always been with Christians, people who call themselves Christians. And it's like, well, I've had to discipline myself to just not do it. To just not do it.
There's some truth when they talk about teaching pigs to fly. And for those who haven't heard it, don't try to teach pigs how to fly, because you're never going to be able to do it, and it makes the pigs very angry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. We still have 4 minutes, so you want to keep going?
Sure. Information without wisdom. True wisdom demands an encounter with reality. Today, however, everything can be created, disguised, and altered. A direct encounter, even with the fringes of reality, can thus prove intolerable. A mechanism of selection then comes into play, whereby I can immediately separate likes from dislikes, what I consider attractive from what I deem distasteful. In the same way, we can choose people with whom we wish to share our world. Persons or situations we find unpleasant or disagreeable are simply deleted in today's virtual networks. A virtual circle is then created, isolating us from the real world in which we are living.
Yep.
Yeah, it's easy to just turn the other way and keep walking. I have a neighbor and we're not the best of friends over the years, but and then there's parking situations, and there's like they have 3 vehicles, and
Oh, golly.
and that, you know, they play the game of kind of saving one by parking a little situation to where they can then later move back so the other one can fit, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes when it comes to those kind of games, I just, instead of getting angry, I just try not to let it bother me and go on my way. When we see each other, this one, well, actually both, male and female, they won't necessarily be the first to recognize me and say hello. And just to kind of, I don't know, be a little mean, I will go out of my way to say, hi, you know, hi, so-and-so, hi, so-and-so, and then they will respond. But yeah, sometimes it's easier just to, you know, not even pay attention to them. But I know that's not, I don't think that's what I'm called to do.
Mm. Yeah, that's not what Jesus would do.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus, you make life so hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's start next week with number 48. And I wish all of you a wonderful Thanksgiving. Sunday, we begin a new church season, the season of Advent, the season of light coming into the darkness, the season of expectation, the season of hope and preparation. And
man, it can't come too early. I think it just puts a whole different kind of feeling in so many people, and that's what we need. I mean, I see it and I hear it already. It's like, wait, let Thanksgiving come first.
Right.
But man, when I do see the lights coming up now and the Christmas songs, it just feels so good.
yeah, David Lowes wrote in his essay this week, he said, I know there are some hardcore people out there who want to just, you know, let Advent be Advent and not rush to Christmas and not, you know, rush to Christmas songs and all of that. He said, but be realistic this year. People need the comfort. People need to feel the hominess of it all. So I'm 100% in agreement with that. Well, I love you all. I'll see you Sunday morning. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, however you celebrate it, but do it safely.
Thank you. You too.
All righty.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Giving.
All right, happy Thanksgiving.
Yay.
Bye-bye.